Hello, and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tian Yu. Coming up in this edition, Palestinian health authorities say Israel's attacks on Gaza since October the 7th have killed nearly 40,100 Palestinians, while over 92,000 have been injured. In the U.S., preparations are underway for Monday's Democratic Party National Convention. Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to formally accept her party's nomination for president. The World Health Organization warns that MPOX may ultimately spill across international borders, with over 18,700 cases already suspected or confirmed in Africa. We begin in the Middle East. The Israel Defense Forces say they have killed dozens of Palestinian fighters in ongoing operations across the Gaza Strip. Hamas has released footage showing its militants striking Israeli vehicles. Palestinian health authorities say Israel's attacks on Gaza since October the 7th have killed nearly 40,100 Palestinians, while over 92,000 have been injured. Akram Al-Satari reports from Han Yunis in Gaza.
The bombardments are continuous. The strikes are also targeting houses of the Palestinians. The targeting of one Palestinian house in Deir al-Balah area where the life of a mother and her 5 children was taken by that airstrike, and also another bombardment that targeted a house in Al-Nusayrat refugee camp where also other 5 family members were killed and other 20 family members were injured because of an Israeli airstrike. The bombardment is still continuous also in Hamad city where a child who's 6 years old was also targeted. She's still anonymous, she's unidentified, and there were some appeals for the people who might know who she was and her family to inform the family so that they come and pick her. Also in Rafah area, the bombardment is still continuous. The destruction of the residential blocks is still continuous. Gaza central area, Khan Yunis area, and Rafah area have been witnessing the peak of the hostilities where the bombardment are still continuous. Also the news coming from Gaza city and the north are indicative of continuous bombardment, continuous targeting, continuous falling of the Palestinian civilians injured or killed, and also continuous destructions of the homes and of the residential towers and of all the agricultural areas that have been subjected to great and large-scale leveling operations by the Israeli occupation forces that were advancing in Khan Yunis area and that are advancing in Rafah area and trying to further control the area in Gaza city.
That was Akram Al-Satari reporting. Meanwhile, Hamas and Israel have traded blame over the progress of negotiations to reach a truce in Gaza. On Sunday, the Palestinian group criticized the latest truce proposal, saying it catered to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conditions. Hamas slammed Netanyahu's rejection of a permanent Gaza ceasefire, Israel's control of several key border crossings, and new conditions for prisoner exchange. The Israeli Prime Minister accused Hamas of refusing to compromise. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv to press for a ceasefire deal, which will be discussed again this week in Cairo. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
The American administration is working in 2 different ways. One is putting pressure on Hamas, not directly, but through Egypt and especially through Qatar, putting a lot of pressure on these 2 factors in order for them to put it on Hamas. And the United States is putting very strong direct pressure on Israel to perhaps agree to certain terms, to make certain compromises. That is what we can expect from the visit of Secretary of State Antony Blinken. But there are still some steps to be done, some compromises to be made on both sides. As far as the Israeli side, the Americans are especially looking for some kind of a compromise on what is known as the Netzarim corridor, which prevents the movement of Palestinians, and also, according to Israel, of militants from the southern Gaza Strip to the northern Gaza Strip. The administration wants the Israeli government to make a compromise on this issue. This would be the main core of the talks of the Secretary of State.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting from Tel Aviv. In the United States, preparations are underway for Monday's Democratic Party National Convention. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to formally accept her party's nomination for president during the 4-day gathering in Chicago. The presidential campaign has changed dramatically in the month since President Joe Biden said he was stepping out of the race. Hendrix Brandy previews the convention and looks at where the campaign stands right now.
The city of Chicago is putting the finishing touches on preparations for the Democratic National Convention. Democrats are in a very different place than they were only a month ago when President Joe Biden was their prospective nominee. Soon after Biden announced he would not run for re-election, the party quickly coalesced around Vice President Kamala Harris.
Suddenly there is a lot of energy there. The party is very unified behind her. She's showing a lot of skills as a campaigner. I think clearly she was ready for this moment.
Seth Mascott of the University of Denver says the convention will provide Harris, who like all vice presidents has had a relatively low profile, an opportunity to define herself and running mate Tim Walz as reasonable, not extreme left-wing Democrats. A large TV audience is expected to tune in this week. It was here in Chicago that protesters clashed with police during the 1968 Democratic Convention, primarily in opposition to the Vietnam War. Protests over the Biden administration's support of Israel amid its war in Gaza are expected in the streets around the United Center this time around.
Our officers have been training for over a year. Our federal, state, local partners, county, we're all working in collaboration to make sure that the city is safe and secure.
Harris is expected to lay out broad themes of her campaign and stress her values during her convention speech on Thursday. But one political analyst says she'll have to address issues like Gaza, the economy, and immigration more in-depth later.
That's something that is going to need to be done in a debate and also in a sit-down interview. This can't be just a plastic television campaign.
The switch in presidential candidates has Democrats riding a wave of momentum at the moment. With Biden out of the race, polls show Donald Trump's statistical advantage with prospective voters has mostly vanished. Democrats now find themselves in that position. Chicago is an opportunity for them to make their case to undecided voters in a handful of swing states that are expected to decide November's election.
That was Hendrix Brandy reporting. In China, President Xi Jinping has held talks with Vietnam's top leader in Beijing. President To Lam is on a 3-day state visit. Lam, also General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, arrived in Beijing on Sunday evening after making a stop in Guangzhou. The Chinese president expressed his readiness to work with his Vietnamese counterpart to jointly guide bilateral relations.
以就任总书记后，首访就来到中国。
China is the first foreign country you visit after you become the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee. This reflects the significance of ties between the two parties and the two countries in your mind, and the strategic importance of China-Vietnam relations. I'm ready to establish good working relations and personal friendship with you to jointly guide the building of China-Vietnam community with a shared future.
The Vietnamese leader's visit will last until Tuesday. Zheng Yibing brings more details on the visit.
The welcome ceremony on Monday morning for General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam and Central Committee and Vietnamese President To Lam was held at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, while both leaders then hold talks on bilateral ties and attending the signing ceremony. The President Xi Jinping congratulated again on President To Lam's elected as the leader of the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, and this shows To Lam attaches great importance to developing relations between the two parties and the two countries, as well as the high-level and strategic ties between the two countries. President Xi says he wants to establish good working ties and personal relations with To Lam and join hands to guide the common destiny of both sides to go deeper and further. Well, this is To Lam's first overseas trip since the 67-year-old was elected as the top leader of the Southeast Asian nation in early August. To Lam arrived in Guangzhou on Sunday and started his 3-day state visit to China. And after the short stay there, he and his delegation headed to Beijing to meet his Chinese counterpart, President Xi Jinping, and begin all the schedules. And To Lam said recently his country has always given top priority to developing relations with China, which is the only country that meets all the priority factors of Vietnam's foreign policy. Well, it is a common expectation of Beijing and Hanoi that the ongoing visit to China by the To Lam can help further synergize the two countries' joint efforts to advance together along the social socialist path, build a community with a shared future, and safeguard international fairness and justice. Toland's 3-day visit is expected to produce the serious agreements on cooperation projects that will substantiate future mutual efforts to help translate that vision into reality and add new substance to the principles of amity, sincerity, mutual benefits, and inclusiveness that guides the relations between the two countries.
That was Zheng Yibing reporting. Finally, on global health, the World Health Organization warns that MPOX may ultimately spill across international borders. The global health body has already declared the virus a global health emergency. This year alone, there have been more than 18,700 suspected or confirmed cases in Africa. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is the hardest hit country. Sweden and Pakistan have also reported their first cases. Jim Spellman reports.
MPOX is a viral disease clinically related to smallpox. Symptoms are generally similar to the flu, fever, chills, and fatigue, often followed by distinctive lesions on the skin. It is generally spread through close physical contact. A new strain of MPOX known as Clade 1b is driving the current outbreak in Africa. On Thursday, the U.S. National Institutes of Health announced that an antiviral drug developed to treat smallpox is not effective at treating MPOX, disappointing researchers here. Vaccines developed for smallpox provide some protection, but they're not widely available in Africa and global supplies are limited. In recent days, cases of MPOX have surfaced in Pakistan and Sweden. Public health officials say further global spread is likely, and many countries are bracing for the impact. While more cases are almost inevitable, researchers say MPOX is unlikely to become a global pandemic similar to COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic led many countries to beef up public health measures, including increased surveillance, contact tracing, and public communication efforts. Those lessons learned from COVID may help officials deal with MPOX.
That was Jim Spellman reporting. Now recapping today's headlines. Palestinian health authorities say Israel's attacks on Gaza since October the 7th have killed nearly 40,100 Palestinians, while over 92,000 have been injured. In the U.S., preparations are underway for Monday's Democratic Party National Convention. Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to formally accept her party's nomination for president. The World Health Organization warns that MPOX may ultimately spill across international borders, with over 18,700 cases already suspected or confirmed in Africa. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports, and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tian Yu. Thank you for listening.